My name is Ghostboy259, and I prayed for the gods. I generally focus on the more puzzler side of indie games when I'm streaming. I feel like when you start to get into the action-oriented games, it only takes one or two things to really turn you off from the whole game, and with my lack of skill, a stream can quickly become me dying 600 times in a row, and it's really not that fun for anyone. Well, sometimes it's fun for people, it's mostly not fun for me. Whereas a puzzler, you can kind of tell right away if you'll enjoy the game or not, and the struggle feels like it's a part of the game. You're not necessarily meant to get it the first time around, and so you have a chance to figure it out and adapt. When you get stuck in a combat game, sometimes it's hard to tell if it's your fault or the game's fault, and sometimes it's both. However, I wanted to branch out on this channel and make an effort to cover games from all walks of life, and when I found Praey For The Gods, it seemed like the perfect thing to give a try since it wasn't just combat. Praey For The Gods is an open-world survival game where players will have to scavenge for everything from food to weapons, keeping warm, all while tracking down 7 gods and killing them in order to save humanity. The game draws inspiration from many games such as Bloodborne, Breath of the Wild, DayZ, Horizon Zero Dawn, and the most obvious one, Shadow of the Colossus. Now, I'll be honest with you, Shadow of the Colossus has been on my list to play for quite some time, and while I do intend to play it eventually, when I heard about this game and all the direct comparisons, I wanted to play this game first, without having played Shadow of the Colossus. I think so many of these games get put into categories like Souls-like or Zelda-esque, and it can be hard to have a clear judgment on these games when you're comparing it to the thing it was inspired by. And generally the thing it's inspired by is an extremely popular and successful game. And that's not to say everyone's judgment of this game is completely wrong if you have played Shadow of the Colossus. I just wanted to come at this game with a different approach. That being said, I do mention the game a few times in this write-up despite having never played it. There are 5 main components to Praey For The Gods: survival, exploration, crafting, combat, and the boss fights. Your character, whose name I believe is Soul, has 5 different bars or meters that will change throughout your playing that you'll need to pay attention to. In the bottom right corner will be displayed hunger, exhaustion, and cold, and near your character you'll have stealth and mana. I want to shout out Phantom Raptor on Steam, whose write-up I used to verify some of the information in the section of this video. Sometimes it's very easy to get things jungled up, and this is honestly one of those games where you can play the entire time and not realize you had something wrong until the very end. Hint, hint, foreshadowing. Hunger affects how fast your stamina will recharge. You'll find little berries scattered throughout bushes in the game that will do the trick, but you can also hunt for animal meat and forage mushrooms and find bread in random boxes, and you'll also have the ability to cook items later. Exhaustion affects how long after you've stopped using stamina that it will recharge again. Anytime you use stamina, the max amount of stamina you have depletes, and the only way to get it back up again is to sleep. Sleeping can be done anywhere if you have a bedroll, but you'll also find lots of caves throughout the game, and in those caves there will be previous camps, often next to frozen dead bodies that you can rest in. Camps will also sometimes have a campfire to heat back up, acting like a total reset point if you need it. Cold will actually start to deal damage to your health and can kill you, as well as making it harder to aim with a bow, which, to be honest, you almost never use the bow in this game. To heat up, you can find pre-made fire pits that all you need to do is add some wood. Besides the pre-made fire pits, you'll also be able to set fire to a torch or any logs you may have in your inventory, but this will eventually go out and is mostly keeping you warm just in a pinch when you really need it. You'll probably want to save that for crafting other things. Now, none of what I just said is actually universal amongst players because of the settings. In fact, one thing I really like about this game is there's quite a few options so you can decide how you want to play. On easy or normal mode, cold cannot kill you, you cannot drown in water, and if you have low health, it will slowly regenerate. Hard and legendary means cold can kill you, you can drown in water, and your health will not regenerate at all. Alternatively, you have 3 settings when it comes to the survival aspects of the game. In story mode, weapons can't break, you can only get cold in extreme weather and it won't do damage, you'll warm up if you're not in extreme weather, and your hunger and exhaustion will regenerate when you're not in a combat situation. In Boost, weapons can break but are repairable, and in Survival, there are negative and positive effects to high and low hunger and exhaustion. You can get cold when you're not in storms, and you need to find heat to regenerate. You won't just get warm on your own. Through my experience, I played on normal and boost. Had I played where cold could kill me, let's just say it would have been a very long and rage-inducing playthrough. I got lost quite a bit. Even though it wasn't actively killing me and all I really had to do was just push through it, you can definitely still feel the weight of the cold moments versus when it's a bit warmer. It reminds me a lot of the survival mode in Skyrim's Creation Club. I imagine in terms of survival games, it's pretty bare bones and par for the course, but I don't think it needed to get any more complicated than that. Still, I like that the game gives you a chance to play how you want. Some people like to get up in arms and gatekeepy with this stuff, but I'm telling you right now, I couldn't give two damns about how you want to enjoy a game. And as we dive into it, it might actually be the right call to play with some of these survival aspects a bit muted. Next up is exploration, and there is quite a bit of it. This is where you'll be spending a majority of your time in the game wandering the frozen wastelands in search of the 7 bosses. Now, if you're like me, you'll just start to wander off with no clear direction, simply exploring every nook and cranny to find anything of interest. There were many moments where I was lost, backtracking, going in a new direction, only to find that I've been going down the wrong pathway the whole time. As frustrating as it was, it made the moment of actually finding something interesting that much cooler, and there's tons of hidden stuff in this game, including equipment upgrades, and of course 7 bosses to stumble upon. But this is where my experience might be a bit of an outlier, because I'm an idiot, unequivocally. Whether it was told to me and I never registered it, or it was so obvious that I never considered it and they didn't think they had to tell me, the giant light in the sky that also appears on your minimap is indeed a marker, and it leads you to where the next boss fight is. However, if you're an anti-quest marker kind of guy, then you're in luck because you can simply ignore this. The game was very cleverly created so that you could do any of the 7 boss fights in any order, outside of the first one, which is forced upon you. And so if you want to play without a quest marker, simply go the opposite direction and have a blast. Although a little tip for you, the bottom right half of the map is pretty much all water. Don't spend an hour trying to cross it like I did, it won't do you much good. I'm not always a quest marker or fast travel kind of guy. I get why they're there, and I believe in the option to turn it off or on, but sometimes I found myself frustrated that I was backtracking so much and there was no easy way to just get back to my base or something. That being said, it's a survival game, and allowing this just wouldn't be in good faith with the game, so I understand why that option wasn't there. Part of survival is exploring, getting lost, and making sure that you can survive on your way to figure out where you are. During your exploration, there will be 3 things you'll be doing a lot: climbing, using a grappling hook to make it across gaps, and using your sailcloth. Yes, I know, a game has a cloth that you can use to glide, it's Zelda, blah blah blah, we get it. You can't climb anywhere, mostly you can't climb on ice, and climbing does use up your stamina. However, for a world filled with rocks and mountains, you can certainly climb a lot, and sometimes using your sailcloth, you can jump halfway up a mountain and climb the rest of the way. One thing that I've seen a lot of people complain about, but I don't know if I necessarily agree, is that the movement is very slow. Personally, I think that's something I actually enjoy about it. You feel extremely tiny in a very large world, surrounded by sky-high mountains, inhibited by the cold snow at your feet. I think if you were running around really fast and cartoon style, bouncing off the walls, the world would just feel really small. There's a real sense of scale with the land, although the only thing I'd say is that this land is borderline impossible for these gods to traverse or leave their areas, but I'm not sure that really matters, and maybe in lore they just don't get out that much. Traversing the map feels like a proper journey, and along the way you'll find sigils that unlock the details of the map, but without these you'll be wandering with vague X's and doors on your map and just hoping that you're going to lead where you haven't been. This exploration part is where you'll find yourself using the survival mechanics the most. Obviously, keeping yourself warm, fed, and rested will help speed up a lot of your traveling process, and of course in harder difficulties, will keep you alive. The game isn't overly generous with resources, but it's not skimpy on them either, but you do have to be on the lookout for them. It's easy to walk by a tree and not realize it, and likewise your inventory is only so big, and sometimes you'll have to make some decisions on what to keep. While stumbling into caves, you'll often be encountered with small puzzles featuring levers or large buttons to hit. These don't happen too often, but they are quite fun to figure out. They ultimately shouldn't take too long, and most will lead directly to boss fights, but others will actually reward you with better, heavier gear, which makes you more or less weaker and slower, but have more warmth to them. So depending on your situation, it may be useful, but to easier modes, these just aren't that good. However, so much of the game revolves around these puzzles and figuring things out, so these moments feel very in tune with the rest of the game. I don't play many games with any sort of crafting system. The only two I can really call back to are Minecraft, which I played very minimally, probably less than 20 hours total, and The Last of Us, which I tended to avoid crafting as much as possible. Because of this, I can't speak on how this compares to other crafting systems, so this is my pretty blank neutral statement on it. It's a crafting system. I think more so to the discussion of this game is, should there have been a crafting system, or did the game try to do too much? Combat is, well, it's just okay. In your inventory, you have 6 tabs, the last one being the map, so not entirely relevant to this, but you'll have melee weapons, bows and arrows, grappling hooks, supplies, and clothing. In melee weapons, you'll find clubs, swords, and axes. These all take damage and can be destroyed, and while you can't upgrade weapons, you can repair them or destroy them and turn them into more crafting supplies. Some weapons have multiple uses, such as the axes that can chop down trees, or the clubs that can be turned into torches, which of course heat you up. Next up is your bow and arrows. Similar to the swords, there's only 2 types of arrows. There's normal and explosive, and you'll find better bows as you play, and bows can also be repaired or destroyed for more parts. I love using bows in pretty much every game I play. I always play as a ranged character when given the choice, but I just didn't use them that much here. There was almost no opportunity. Next, you'll have the grappling hooks. You can carry up to 3. There are better quality ones. I couldn't tell you what they do, if they reach farther or something, or just last longer. This is also a good time to mention you'll find soul items called a soul hook or soul blade, and the descriptions are just a bunch of question marks. I don't know what these are, except that they just look cooler, which honestly is good enough for me. I think they may be used to fight some of the ghostly enemies, but I can't verify, like maybe you can't hit them without the soul stuff, but as far as I'm aware, it's never explained. They're not needed, they're just better versions of base equipment. Next up, we have our supply tab. Pretty much everything goes into this: food, potions, bedrolls, and most importantly, wood. The bundle of wood is the most important thing you'll collect in this game, as it can be turned into bows and swords and grappling hooks and arrows and fires. Obviously not of the best quality for most of those, but if you're in a pinch, it is so useful to have any of these available to you at any time. Lastly, we have our clothing tab, and while there isn't a ton of options to collect, I think you can only get 1 more of each thing, which is the heavier, warmer version. All of your clothing can be upgraded to offer better warmth and defense. You can also find pouches and upgrade those in order to carry more of everything else in the game, which will be important. There are 6 different types of crafting supplies that you'll find. They're often in boxes or dropped by enemies, and destroying items that you won't use for sure to get extra supplies is always a good idea. There are also totems, as you can see in the top right. These are scattered everywhere. Some are easy to get to, others not so much, and collecting 3 will allow you to upgrade either your stamina or HP. This is the only way to upgrade those. I generally opted for HP because I die a lot playing video games, but obviously you choose whatever works best for you and could very easily be dependent on your settings. Now, despite all the talk of swords and arrows, combat is unfortunately extremely limited in this game. Besides wild animals that I just truthfully was not fast enough to kill, I only encountered maybe 3 or 4 types of enemies that actually required the use of hacking and slashing. You have these basic undead characters who will spawn out of the ground and chase you, these ghoul ghost type things that can only be damaged by soul weapons. I think that's just a theory, I don't know if that's true or not. You have these plants that come out of the ground, which are probably the most prevalent of these combat creatures, and then you have champions. Champions are the only ones really worth getting into because they drop a considerable amount of loot, and they follow a pattern that is similar to boss fights, and quite honestly, it's the only part of this game that remotely feels like Dark Souls to me, although I say that as someone who has never played Dark Souls, but when people brought up Dark Souls, I assumed this must have been the part they're talking about. You hack and slash, you dodge roll out of the way, and eventually the champion will drop to its knees. Once it's done, you have to climb on its back and you'll see a bell. I know it's not really a bell, but at the beginning of the game they call it a bell, so that's what I call it. The bell requires 3 full rings to fully kill the champion. You have to pull back, wait until it's at its height, and then bam. And generally after 1 or 2, he'll shake you off and do a tremendous amount of damage in doing so, meaning you'll likely have to get 1 or 2 or 3 and a bit pushes off of a cycle. The champions respawn, and it took me multiple tries to beat them all the times I tried, making them mostly worth your while just for the amount of resources they drop, but if you don't need anything, you can kind of just skip them. The problem is outside of this, there's really no combat to speak of. The bosses in this game, which we haven't gotten to yet, the things that I call titans or gods or whatever, they don't use this combat system at all, unless it's to maybe hit something to activate a switch. But otherwise, it's a completely different system, and since this one is so underutilized, it just begs the question as to why this isn't more of a boss rush style. But then again, that would also really invalidate a lot of the survival mechanics, which also people wonder, did they really need this? And we'll transition to bosses for now, and then we're going to come back to combat later and survival mechanics and discuss how this all fits in. I'm not going to break down individual bosses, but outside of a few arrows being shot, there aren't any bosses that ever require you to hit them with a sword. Most of them will involve clever timing, moving out of the way at the right moment, climbing onto the boss themselves, and then ringing several bells to defeat them. Now I want to make this clear. As underwhelming as it is to fight these bosses and to not hack and slash them with all the gear that you've been collecting, I adore the bell system in this game. I think lore-wise, it's such a cool idea. It makes everything feel a little man-made, almost medieval, Nordic, cyberpunkish, which is an insane combination. And I loved that we saw it at the beginning to open a door, and then we see it on these large creatures of this frozen land. It makes everything feel so mechanical, like ancient technology is powering this world and it's all connected. Having not played Shadow of the Colossus before, I've never had that moment of standing in front of and staring at a creature that truly feels larger than life. And with all the bosses in this game, I immediately felt like the smallest thing in the world, and I loved that overwhelming feeling. Every fight felt like it was against all odds, and it made defeating them feel all the more satisfying. The panic you feel when climbing and having to jump on from limb to the back, the button mashing trying to hold on, the risk of standing on the back while hundreds of feet in the air so you can try to regain stamina. Even during the extremely frustrating fights or small mechanics that maybe didn't work as well as intended, I genuinely enjoyed it, and if anything, this game really makes me want to play a game like Shadow of the Colossus to experience more like this. I've heard people argue that you feel way too small in these fights, that you do a ton of running just because of how big everything is and surrounding you all the time, and sometimes in the middle of a boss fight you'll walk for just 20 seconds uninterrupted to get better positioning. And personally, I couldn't disagree more. I loved that feeling of being small, and I loved that the environments were so big. This was another creature's territory, not yours, and you have to play on their turf by their rules. The big problem for me, and this is where I assume people felt the big disconnect, is that you spend all your time using these survival mechanics and upgrading to get the best gear possible, only for it to not matter in the slightest in the fights that matter the most. The game is building up to these god fights, and nothing you do before that or after that is relevant to them. It doesn't matter how good your sword or bow is because you won't be using them. In order to beat bosses, you have to go through a cycle, you knock them down, you climb all around them, you hit the bells, and that's how you defeat them. No swords, no slashes, and it doesn't really matter how hot or cold you are. I expected waves, maybe enemies in the caves, guys to fight in between boss cycles, but no, it's not really there. And while the champions did feel what I imagine Dark Souls feels like, and the gods are these big puzzle-like fights that I really enjoyed solving, the game sorely misses just a touch more, or maybe needs a touch less. The exploration is fun, and I think it intentionally feels empty, and there's still enough to find there that it's fun to explore, so I don't mind that, but I just think there's a missed opportunity to have more actual, meaningful combat. I think that's why people just feel disconnected from the game, because you're just wondering where the survival elements fit into these big fights. You spend your whole time traveling, keeping warm, eating food, resting well, and none of that matters except for when you need to heal yourself in a boss fight. And then the stamina maybe takes a hit and you have to run and climb at the same time. Heck, if you play your cards right, you don't even need any upgrades or any new equipment because the game naturally gives you spaces in between ringing the bells to recharge stamina and get your bearings. You might be able to play this game completely itemless if you know what you're doing. Unless they brought on more people before release, No Matter Studios was originally advertised as just being 3 people, and while I always take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt, I don't think I have to tell you how insanely impressive it is that most likely a majority of this game was done by 3 people, regardless of how long it took for this game to come out. I try to remember things like that when I criticize games, because in no way am I saying I didn't enjoy this game. I very much did, and it gave me some memorable parts that I had never experienced elsewhere. I understand that adding more enemies, more enemy types may have delayed the game easily by a few more years with such a small team, but if I had to point at one thing that was missing or disconnected, it would be that. That being said, I really did love the boss fights. I think it's part of the game with the most attention given to it, and it shows. If you can handle the survival and exploration stuff, or even if you want to just play it easy, just to run directly to the bosses and just do a boss rush yourself, I would honestly recommend even doing just that, because it's a fun time. Had I known what the survival mechanics would build up to in this game, which was not much, I would have just shut them off from the beginning and really enjoyed the boss fights, and I'd probably have a more positive experience. But the boss fights were also fun enough that it didn't take away from anything either. I don't really play, nor do I really like survival games all that much. Some people revel in collecting supplies, crafting, making sure you have food and warmth to get you by, maybe trading with other players if it's an online thing, but for me it's always just added layers that I've never particularly sought out in a game. I love the touches in my D&D campaigns, do you have food when you're going to sleep, but I don't need to, know when my character is using the bathroom. And in my video games, it's just things I care about less. If I'm playing Oblivion, I'm not role-playing to make sure I'm eating 3 meals a day, I've never played a game where crafting feels like it's absolutely perfect or it totally makes sense to me. That being said, I think the game here does well. It's probably a very base version of a survival system, but I don't think I have a solution to help bridge all of these mechanics into one game. I like the exploration because it makes the world feel huge and vast, and traversing it with no downside doesn't feel right. I like the champions because they add a fun challenge that uses the weapons and items you've been working hard to acquire, but then when you get the new weapons and items, the only thing to kill is more champions, and it doesn't feel like a proper climax to this mechanic. And I really like the god fights. I don't think I would change most of them at all. If anything, I would do it very briefly, but I wouldn't add combat. I think adding combat would take away from it. Some people said this is a studio that just tried to do it all, but honestly, I'm not sure what they could have done differently without removing 1 or 2 of these elements entirely, which would have just made it a very different game. But I would love to hear if you have any thoughts, if you have played this game or not. It does feel like removing exploration and survival is the easiest solution, but at the same time, that's so much of where the heart of the game is. I don't know. If what you're craving are those really fun to play boss fights, large epic fights against behemoths and titans, then I think there's something to enjoy about this game. And I'm glad I played this before playing a game like Shadow of the Colossus, if only because I see so many direct comparisons in the comments, and I feel like the game deserves better than just to be called clone. Overall, I really enjoyed my experience with Praey. It wasn't perfect by any means. There were certainly some confusing parts, some mechanics that ultimately felt like it wasted my time, but I also don't think it deserves a lot of the negativity I've seen surrounding it. There's a lot of fun to be had here. I'm really glad I got into this game with no real knowledge of Shadow of the Colossus because it allowed me to come in unbiased and just enjoy this game for what it was. Despite what a lot of the negative reviews will tell you, I also think the very positive reviews on Steam were also warranted. It was an extremely ambitious project carried out by a very small team, and in the end they have built something great. On Steam, when writing this, one of the top reviews was by Flavius Claudius Julianus, and it ends with, "It's one of the few games that has boldly stood up with ambition to fill in literally bigger shoes. Despite its flaws, it's still an achievement made by 3 passionate people. Not a masterpiece, but an amazing experience nonetheless." And honestly, I don't think I could sum it up any better than that. I think sometimes we tend to view games in a lens of what they do perfect. Does Praey For The Gods do anything perfectly? I don't think so, but it does a lot of things really good, and that should count for something. If the game is on sale and you like the idea of fighting 7 or 8 really large Titan bosses, pick it up. You won't be disappointed. As for me, well, I'm Ghostboy259 and I prayed for the gods, and I took them down one sigil at a time. Next time, I'll pray for something else. Thanks for watching.